here's my mission. A lot of people say, why did you write a book? Well, you know, if you've ever experienced leaving a role, you go through this identity crisis and you go, oh my gosh, I was 7-Eleven. I was there for 21 years. And when I left, it was tough. It was like, now what? And I was still a pretty young guy. This was in 2005. We sold the company to the Japanese licensee. And I went through this crisis and I said, well, I don't know what I am. And I went to art school. And I said, I'm going to be an artist. I don't know. I just had nothing better to do at the time. This is before taking on the challenge of Blockbuster. But I said, you know, point is, my identity was not 7-Eleven. I could do anything I wanted to do, and my identity could be anything I wanted it to be. And I knew that, but I had to relearn it. And I learned that you can basically learn anything. So my mission today is not just to help humanity learn to fly, and you'll see what I mean in a while, but I want to help each of you. That's my job tonight. I've got about 30-40 minutes to help you learn to fly. Now, not literally, unless you can see me afterwards. I do fly an airplane, I can help you do that. But at least figuratively, at least metaphorically, I want to help you learn how to fly. And so follow me, and I'll let you check me at the end. You give me a grade whether or not it was successful. So let's get started. That's, by the way, that's my best buddy. It's my co-pilot here. His name's Aspen. He flies with me from time to time. He's really good. He works cheap. So this is sort of some of the stuff I do. Yeah, I've done a zero gravity flight. When you open yourself up to say yes, you can do anything. I had a call one day from Charlie Duke, Apollo 16. Long story. Buzz Aldrin, old friend. He and I got an award together. I was able to stand on stage and say, I'm here because of this guy, because he inspired me as a kid, as an astronaut, and then he introduced me to all these other astronauts. And so Charlie Duke from Apollo 16 over on the left, and that's Nicole Stott, who was on the space shuttle and the space station a couple of times. They called me up and said, hey, we're doing this Omega watch deal where we have to, toss an Omega watch in zero gravity. You want to come with your book and we'll do we can toss your book to Charlie in zero gravity. I'm like, yes. Yes. And I literally got to fly up, pick him up in North Carolina. He lives in North Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina. Picked him up in my plane, threw him in the right seat. And because I had General Duke with me, called up NASA and said, can we land on the shuttle strip? Yes. So we land on the shuttle strip. They bring out the water cannons for us. I mean, I tell people my life is an adventure every day. I never know what's going to happen tomorrow because I say yes, and because I've learned how to learn, because I can do a lot of different things. You see me painting. I mentioned I went to the Florence Academy of Art. They let me in. I don't know why. It's a serious art program. Well, I do know why. They wanted help raising money for a new school. And they said, well, we'll let you come in for a couple months if you help us figure out how to build a new school. Okay, got it. But I got to learn painting and sculpting and plein air drawing, and I mean, it was just fabulous experience. I write music. I play a whole bunch of sports. I'm not saying all this stuff to say, oh yeah, I'm a Renaissance man, blah, blah, blah. No, one of these days I'll find something I'm good at. Keep trying, keep looking. I'm just kidding about the pilot thing. You have to be good to be a pilot. So when I tell people that, I'm never flying with you. But no, I learned how to learn. And it didn't start this way. Let me show you how it started. A lot of people think, you probably grew up rich parents, Dallas suburb, went to Highland Park schools or whatever. No, this is my house. That's a 3-room shack up in Massachusetts, Grafton, Mass, if anyone knows the area. And I was just in Ghana, literally last week, in Accra, Ghana. And I'm showing this slide, and I felt a little guilty. I'm like, playing the poor boy in Africa. I said, okay, so here's the deal. I'm talking to 15,000 entrepreneurs in Ghana, hanging on every word. I said, here's the way I grew up. Now, some of you grew up more humbly than that, but none of you had to shovel snow to go to the outhouse. So I got you there. I definitely have you there. So yeah, I mean, this is my dad. He's the big guy. I'm the little one here. I didn't know we were poor until somebody brought, well, the government cheese, that big block of cheddar cheese. I thought that was one hint. And then at Christmas one year, the church brought food. And I thought, why are they bringing us food? My grandmother had to explain, because we don't have enough money to feed the family. And I was like, well, that's nice, but we don't need that food. I just had no earthly idea. But the poverty wasn't the issue. The issue was the change, the disruption that as a child I faced. My mom was tired of that. By the time I was 5, she bailed, went upscale to the trailer park because they had running water. My dad passed when I was 12, and he used to say to me, he'd say, Jim, I don't know what to tell you, because neither of my parents made it past the 6th grade. But he'd say, they can take your stuff, they can take your house. They did. They can take your money, they can take your car. They can never take what you know. So somehow, he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but in those books is the answer. You know, dedicate yourself to knowledge, because no one can ever take that away from you. It's kind of fatalistic. True, right? And it turned out to be true, because I came home from school one day, I was 11 years old, walking home in the snow. Wasn't that far, but there's a red sign tacked on the door of this house, and it said the word condemned. I didn't even know what the word meant. I had to go look it up. And then my dad got shipped off to a VA hospital. I got booted out to, live with some siblings who had just gotten married, and it was change, constant change. And that was a pretty alarming situation. Now, here's what I tell people, especially I love when I'm telling kids this. That was my superpower. I had such an advantage growing up with those harsh conditions, because what they built into me was resilience, was independence, and a recognition that I didn't have a safety net. There wasn't anybody to catch me. If I didn't go out and do it myself, nobody was going to do it. So it built agency, something that too few of our kids today seem to have. There's a thing saying the American dream is dead. No, it's not. Our will to take advantage of the American dream is what's dead. We see so many Americans, first-generation Americans, coming here enjoying the American dream. Why aren't kids in Oak Cliff accessing the same American dream? Because they're being told they can't. It's not available to them, but it is. And it all starts inside with each of us. So from there, I had some good opportunity. I won't take you through the whole journey, but I did have some really wonderful teachers who took me aside. I can't imagine what it was like, because I didn't have a bath until I was 12. No toothbrush. I can't imagine as a little kid. Thank goodness little kids aren't too stinky until they grow up. At least I don't think I was. I probably was, but thank goodness my teachers took me aside and said, kid, you're smart. You're working hard. You've got something here. Stay with it. And they encouraged me, and that encouragement helped me continue to learn, continue to pursue more and more education, got myself into college, ended up getting an opportunity because it was a scholarship. I didn't even get a scholarship to go to college, believe it or not. I had to pay my own way working at McDonald's. Ended up going to London, to one of the schools of the University of London, and then got into Columbia Business School by some miracle. I think they let me in. Keep in mind, I had just gone to London to school. I had one suit. It was powder blue. The bell bottoms were that wide. Platform shoes. And I still remember to this day, big lapels. I remember walking across campus at Columbia for my interview, thinking, these kids don't know how to dress. Man, they're dressed in these dark suits. They look boring. I'm hip. I'm here. I think that's why they let me in. I look like a clown. I've got pictures of that suit. I still own the suit, by the way. It almost fits. But yeah, so fortunate. Ended up in the oil industry. I got an internship. I was trying to do a JD MBA and ended up doing it backwards at the business school first. Got an internship with Gulf Oil. They then moved to they merged with Chevron. I was at the shareholder meeting when Boone Pickens showed up trying to buy the company. Gave the Gordon Gekko Greed is Good speech in front of the shareholders. Scared me to death. I thought, And I also thought, he's right. There's a lot of fat in this company. And they merged with Chevron after being under attack from Boone Pickens. And right around that time, 7-Eleven here in Dallas had just gotten into the gasoline business. And actually with Steve Susser's family right outside, I had never met Steve. Knew his dad very well, knew his brothers, whole family, his uncles. But they had helped 7-Eleven start the gasoline business, but they had no supply. And so 7-Eleven bought a company called Citgo Petroleum from City Service, which was actually a target of Gulf Oil. I was in the M&A group at Gulf right out of grad school trying to buy City Service, so I happen to know more about City Service than a lot of people. I had studied it for about 2 years. And when 7-Eleven bought City Service, the downstream, they grabbed me and said, come help us. And I did. So that's how I got to Dallas and how I got to 7-Eleven, through the oil business. Well, so now, everything's great, right? I'm this hotshot business guy. I'm wearing like a real suit to work now. Well, except for that picture, that didn't look like it. I did sport the stash back then. That was a carryover from my old days. But I thought everything was great until it wasn't. Anybody remember what happened to 7-Eleven in 1987? Not too many of you even were around then.
Wall Street crash.
Wall Street crash, Black Monday, 1987, October. And 7-Eleven was trying to do an LBO. They were trying to take the company private. Instead of pulling the deal, they went forward. And they funded $4 billion of debt at 17% interest.
Yes.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it was crazy. But I mean, that's what interest, we bet you about 6% today. I mean, we've been through some historically tough times. This was right after Black Monday. So they followed through, they did the deal, and it was just a matter of time before all of a sudden 7-Eleven can't deal with the cash flow obligation. They were buried in debt, and by 1991, they filed for bankruptcy. Now, change, again. I'm like, okay, here we go again. What's wrong with me? How come everywhere I go, there's this catastrophic change? I go to Gulf Oil, one of the Seven Sisters, and all of a sudden they're like under siege. And they have to merge with Chevron to save their lives. Maybe it's me. I go to 7-Eleven, all of a sudden they're bankrupt. So I sat down with the chairman of the company, and he told me a story. And if anybody knows the Thompson family, they were right here from Dallas. They started in Oak Cliff, a guy named Joe C. Thompson. His sons, John and Jerry Thompson, then were part of the growth of the company. But Joe C. started in Oak Cliff, 12th Street, with an ice house. And in this ice house, they sold blocks of ice for your ice box. It's hard for us to even imagine. They would mine this ice, believe it or not, in the Great Lakes, ship it down on barges, and wagon it across to Dallas and bury it 100 feet underground. When he told me the story, I was like, come on, how is that even possible? And do this economically? But there was no other way to get ice for your ice box. How are you going to keep stuff cold without refrigeration? Well, until 1927, 1928, somebody invents something called the Frigidaire. Now, all of a sudden, you just plug it in the wall. And it didn't make ice back then, but it sure would keep things cold, so you didn't need ice for your ice box. So what happens to your business model if all you do is sell ice? They would have been out of business by 1930. So John Thompson, the chairman at the time, if you remember, Fousey's was a bar down here on McKinney. And I was one of the only guys that would show up on a Saturday for work. And he'd look around and see who was in the parking lot. And he'd pick up the phone and say, hey, Jim. And 3 or 4 other crazy people that would work on a Saturday, let's go have lunch. And so we would have lunch at Fousey's. And I asked him, after 2 or 3 Fousey's, these are pretty powerful drinks, little frozen bellinis, they were awesome. John, should I quit? I'm kidding, you know? Should I go somewhere else? And he said, let me tell you the story of my dad and how this thing started. And he said, my Uncle Johnny Green, this guy here, was on the dock asking customers what they wanted, and the customers said, we don't come here for the ice, we come here for the convenience. Where else would we get ice in Dallas, Texas? And his customers said, sell us other stuff we need for our refrigerator. We're going to throw away our ice box, but we still need stuff for our refrigerator. Sell us that. And that literally was how the convenience industry was born. And right here in Dallas, Texas, they call them totem stores. You totem stores. And they had a little totem pole. And that's the way the company worked. Now, his message to me was, Jim, 1991 now, we're in bankruptcy. He said, we forgot that our business is convenience. We think it's beer, soft drinks, and cigarettes. And that's all we sell. But people will always need convenience. He said, the one thing I can assure you, beer and cigarettes may go away. Convenience will never die. So your job is look all over the world for what's next, what things do people need conveniently. And I took them seriously. Started putting ATMs in every store. Couldn't justify it economically, but we wanted people to know if I go to 7-Eleven, there's an ATM there. And then it became a huge revenue generator for the company because everybody knew 7-Eleven stood for ATMs. It was a bold move in the beginning. The machines were very expensive, and all we were getting is a small transaction fee out of each one. And that was just one of many, many opportunities we had to bring convenience products into 7-Eleven. And it helped to transform the company, totally transform the company. So my takeaway, and the first 3 words I wrote down in this book, when I wrote the book, I said, okay, got to get across this point that change equals opportunity. And those are the literally first 3 words I wrote. And I stepped back and went, hey, check that out, CEO. Huh. Duh. Right? It is the job of the CEO to embrace change. And yet, my peers, I could tell you horror stories. CEO of Coca-Cola, hey guys, I want to test this new product. No, you kidding me, Jim? I literally had CEO of Coca-Cola one day, I was trying to test a new distribution system to go direct to store. He says, you think I got to this job by taking stupid risks? I was like, I'm your largest customer in the world, and you're not going to try something with me? Fear. Unwillingness to embrace change. With technology, we could have gone to direct distribution. He just didn't want to do it. He was afraid to do it. And so I learned that that is the job of the CEO. That change does equal opportunity. And I didn't realize this at that point in my career, but all of that trouble that I dealt with as a kid prepared me so well for realizing that change equals opportunity, because every one of those devastating things that happened to me, there was a silver lining in that storm. There was a good that came out of that crisis, whatever it was, through my entire life. Now here I am in my corporate career. So here I am in a bankrupt company. Everybody's got their head down. You all know political games. They get really nasty if you're right there on the edge of bankruptcy. I mean, people are at each other's throats. It's dog eat dog. And then the other people are like, no, I'm out of here. They quit. They go away. They don't want to come to work. And it's just reality. It's human nature. I was like, I got this. 7-Eleven's not going to go away. Convenience not going to go away. We got this. So I kept working harder, longer. I got fired in the process. My boss, I was actually quietly working for the CFO while I'm running the gasoline business. I was one of the only guys in the company with an MBA, and he needed help crafting a new business plan to propose for the emergence of bankruptcy. So I'm quietly working on it. My boss, meanwhile, is jealous, afraid, wondering what I'm working on. Can't tell him because I'm working with the investment bankers and I'm working with the CFO. So I'm just trying to just keep it under the radar screen. And he calls me in one day and gives me a performance review, and it was the worst performance review I ever got in life. Pulled my admin, said no more admin. Pulled my title, took my VP title away. I was now a general manager or something. And he said, if I were you, Jim, I'd quit. Well, I went home that night and said, yeah, I think I just lost my job. But I don't think he's got the guts to fire me because he didn't escort me out of the building, so I'm going to go to work tomorrow. So I did. I went back to work the next day, and I worked harder, and I kept working. Now, 6 months later, we've got new ownership. We emerged from bankruptcy. My plan is now the plan in place. He gets fired. I get named head of strategic planning for the new enterprise, right? Change equals opportunity. So here's the message. Here's the strongest message that I learned as a child. I could do nothing about what family I was born into. Could have been born into a family in Ghana. Wouldn't have had to shovel snow to the outhouse, but it could have been worse. And I couldn't do anything about that surrounding. I couldn't do anything about my parents' issues. That wasn't my problem. It wasn't my fault. Although as a kid, you tend to internalize it and think it is. What I realized, though, is I had complete control over how I responded to that environment. And that's what so many of us forget today. That we can't control what's going on out there. Tomorrow morning, we could have another financial meltdown. Nothing we can do about it. What we can control is the way we respond, how we react, and keep our head up rather than let us become a victim. And so that is the essence of change equals opportunity, that change starts in a recognition that we can do something that starts with each of us. So I've taken that message and took it to 7-Eleven and ended up having a great career. I ended up staying as the head of strategic planning. After that, became chief financial officer. Now, here's the reality. One accounting class. I was a poli-sci major undergrad. I had one accounting class at Columbia Business School. When they made me CFO, I went home and said, oh shit, where's my accounting books? A debit on the left or the right, a credit on the, I can't remember. I'm in deep trouble. Thank God I had a really good controller and a really strong audit department. And they kept me, this is during the Enron vintage days, right? And they're out there telling me, oh, Jim, we got these offshore special purpose entities, save all this money, Oh, you don't need to understand it, just do it. Ooh. My ignorance actually helped because my threshold was, if I can't understand it enough to explain it to the board, I have no business doing it. And it kept me a lot out of trouble. And it helped me in that role of CFO. And that was when I was in my strongest learning zone. When you're outside of your comfort zone, doing something you're totally unqualified for, doing something that scares the crap out of you, that's when you learn the most. And I was a far better CEO, having served as a CFO in that company. And it's also, I like to tell people, this was a troubled company. It was in bankruptcy. If I went to work for Frito-Lay, I'd probably be a product manager now still, selling Cheetos. I wouldn't have had the privilege of running not one but two Fortune 500 companies. So let's talk about the other ones. So we sell 7-Eleven, and then what do? Something really stupid. I'm looking around, private equity's throwing money at me. They're like, man, you had a 10x increase in equity value from the time you took over as CEO till you sold the company, and we want to throw money at you. Let's go buy something. And I was trying to buy Blockbuster to take it private because I knew the difficulty, the heavy lift of taking a company that was still, by the way, running Fortran and COBOL. I can tell you this crowd, I walk in the door, I'm like, you're running what? Who helps you patch this stuff? They had these old guys they would bring in that understood how to program still and make modifications in Fortran. I swear they were like guys with beards, like old guys that were coming in to do it because they were still running the old legacy systems. And by now, Oracle was out there with it wasn't quite a cloud yet, but there were enterprise systems that could have really improved Blockbuster, but that really wasn't the problem. So how many of you here think I'm the guy that didn't keep up with technology? Come on, be honest. Yeah, okay. Only a couple brave people. If you look me up on the internet, you're going to find all kinds of, and these kids that usually say this stuff, weren't even old enough to be in Blockbuster, and yet they'll say, oh yeah, KEYES, he's the idiot that turned down Netflix for $50 million. Anybody hear that story? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it happened in the year 2000. And you know why Blockbuster turned it down? Because Blockbuster had a sweetheart deal with Enron. Mm-hmm. Now, Enron, you go, why would they do a deal with Enron? Enron was a trading company, but as a trading company, they bought up bandwidth, they bought up spectrum. They were sitting on more spectrum than anybody else in the world. So when Mark Cuban's out there trying broadcast.com, he couldn't get enough bandwidth to do much of anything but broadcast a few sporting events. Enron's sitting on all this spectrum with the opportunity to partner with Blockbuster and light up streaming while everybody else was sitting around scratching their heads saying, how'd they do that? Now, then you know what happened to Enron. Okay, so, but was Blockbuster blind to the opportunity? No, 7 years before I got there in 2007, they were already way ahead of anybody else in thinking about streaming and how to do it. Unfortunate choice of partner, but.
That's it.
Yeah, well, so then that bandwidth ended up getting sold, the spectrum gets sold to who? Dish Network, bought a lot of it, hold that thought. So, 2007, I get there, I'm like, okay, first thing I gotta do is buy a streaming video company. I had the choice, all of you faced this choice, buy it or build it, right? I'm going, geez, we're still running Fortran and COBOL, I don't have a team inside to build this thing. I'm not gonna build it in that. Why don't I try to buy it? And the studios had already developed a streaming company called MovieLink. And they had already had the streaming platform. It was done. They had 3,000 digitized titles already. Now nobody's streaming. Maybe a couple kids on their Xbox, that's about it. Buffering, we were just one step ahead of dial-up in 2007, if you recall. And so, I mean, we were way ahead of our time, but we bought the company, had the exclusive rights to all the new titles, had Netflix, going, oh, we're gonna be in deep trouble. And then we had two deals that would have been killer deals. One was, we had a deal to lock up all the old content exclusively, but it was $100 million a year. This was with Viacom. Now we made about $250 million in EBITDA, so it wouldn't have broke our back, but you're sitting there, you're going, I don't know how long it's gonna take for bandwidth to catch up to make streaming be able to be monetized. Do I roll the dice on a $100 million a year investment now? And my board said, no, let's not do it. It's too risky. Hindsight's 2020, would have done it all day long, restructured the company around that asset, and Netflix would still be doing DVDs by mail. True. Second deal, which would have been a way to now support that $100 million. I get a call from Google, a guy named Nikesh Arora, was the number 2 and number 3 guy at Google, if you remember Nikesh. He goes, okay, Jim, I got this deal. We are getting the crap beat out of us by the studios because we bought YouTube, and kids are streaming free content. Yeah. We need to partner with you so that we have a dual platform. Everything free is YouTube, everything paid. TV, movies, anything. Paid content is Blockbuster. Sweetheart deal. My board signs it. Now I've greased the skids to be able to then buy the exclusive content to feed that. We've already got the new releases to feed it. Now it's just a matter of waiting for bandwidth to catch up. And then what happens?
You're surprised, right?
Yeah, thank you. 2008 financial crisis. Lehman Brothers collapses, GM and Ford go to the White House looking for bailouts. I'm running a company named Blockbuster with $1 billion of debt due in 2009. After violating like 3 bank covenants when I got there. And so now my change equals opportunity. Didn't feel like it at the time. My job had to pivot from transforming the company to surviving, to helping the company survive. And the sharks were circling. The debtors, the guys that buy the cheap debt, try to push the company into bankruptcy. Carl Icahn was one, left the board, sold his equity, bought the cheap debt, now he's hell-bent to see the company file. I knew he was gonna do it. He didn't do anything illegal in doing it, but I'm running a public company. It wasn't in the cards. Plus I had these strategic deals that no one knew about. So dial forward, net, here's what happened. Dish Network surfaced. Oh, by the way, the debtors, someone leaked a story that Blockbuster was going to file. And as soon as that happened, of course, everybody panicked. I'm in the New York Post with a half-page picture. You haven't lived until you see yourself with a Pinocchio nose. And your buddies from school call you up and go, "Hey, Keys, nice nose. It really looks good." And the headline, "Blockbusted." Yeah, it was bad. And then the next day I get a call from Nikesh, and he goes, "Sorry, Jim, but my board saw the news that you guys are going to file." "No, we're not going to file. You have no reason to file." But the rumor was out there, they pulled the deal, and then that triggered the dominoes fall, and the studios pulled my credit terms from 90 days to cash. Now I had 3 weeks to find a way to restructure the company. Dish stepped up. They had bought that spectrum, much of that spectrum. Their vision was to combine Blockbuster with Sprint, T-Mobile, and offer a mobile service where they never touched the internet. They went straight to your cell phone with movies. You'd have all the old movies free with the cell service, and then you'd do a pay-per-view on new movies and upload them to any device. It was a brilliant strategy. They orchestrated that for 2 or 3 years, got tired of the government not releasing the spectrum and not releasing the bandwidth. We're just now barely 5G, as you know. And so they ended up deciding to close the company. So what's the lesson out of all of this? There's a couple of things, and I told you I was going to teach you to fly. What I see from the cockpit and what my buddies, the astronauts, see is something we call an overview effect. I can see at 40, I fly basically between 40 and 45,000 feet. I'm lighter than the torso guy, so I can get up that high. And from the cockpit, I can just barely see the curvature of the Earth at 45,000 feet. And what the astronauts call the overview effect is there's no borders. There's no wars, there's no races. It's one beautiful planet with one human race. And they call that a perspective, having a different perspective on the planet and on humanity. And then here's what happens when they splash down or when I land. I land at Addison Airport, I get out of my plane, I look at my phone, and I'm now hit with a fire hose of perception. Social media, turn on the news, fire hose of perception. Doesn't matter what channel. Fear driven. They're coming to get you. They're going to take your house. They're going to take your car. Like my dad used to say, right? They're coming for your family. They're coming for this. They're going to do that to you. Fear works. Unfortunately, it works in a corporate environment. It works in a family environment. It works in a societal environment. It's the lowest common denominator for leaders. Now, as a leader, I could have used a lot of fear, but I preferred to go down the inspirational path, try to lead through inspiration and vision, because fear, I don't think, is sustainable competitive advantage. It works for a while, but how long can you sustain it? Where inspiration, you can keep sustaining it as long as that inspiration keeps coming. So the point is, Blockbuster is a good example. If you had the perception that Netflix crushed Blockbuster because Blockbuster didn't keep up with technology, then you missed one of the best case studies in business today. Don't feel bad, Harvard missed it. Harvard did a case study on Netflix and Blockbuster, and they missed it completely. They chalked it up to Blockbuster failing to keep up with technology. You miss cash flow implications, activist shareholder implications, vendor communications implications, cash management. You missed all kinds of rich learning if you stop at perception and don't use your critical thinking skills to have a better perspective. That same case study, if you were guilty of that with Blockbuster, then I'm going to challenge each of you to how often do you have perspective versus be vulnerable to those perceptions that can lead you astray. So let's see what we can do. First thing we have to do is recognize what's driving those perceptions. We're humans. We're vulnerable. We have this thing called the amygdala in our brain. I've become a bit of a neuroscientist geek because I realized that my friends who are locked in these perceptions driven by fear, it's not their fault. They're being very human because we have this fight or flight trigger that we were born with. Right out of the box, our computer is programmed in patterns. And one of those patterns is fight or flight if you're scared. And so we do that as humans. But the difference as humans, we have a prefrontal cortex that allows us to, instead of fighting or running away, we have the ability to use our brain, use our critical thinking, find out what the truth is, and eliminate that fear through knowledge. It's possible. Neuroplasticity, changing the patterns that our computer was programmed with into new patterns. I mean, think about it. It's 86 billion neurons. It's not much different than ones and zeros. Our brain is working off patterns. So how do we change those patterns? And that's what's possible. Yoda pointed it out to Luke in Star Wars, said fear leads to the dark side. You must learn to be a Jedi. You must have knowledge to be a Jedi, to eliminate fear. And the replacement, once you have knowledge, is instead to replace ignorance with knowledge and eliminate fear by replacing it with understanding. I compare it to a kid that's scared in the dark and he turns on the light. Mom comes in and turns on the light. I'm not scared anymore because I know what's not here. There's no monster in the room. I can see. That's knowledge. And it's available to all of us. It's more available today than ever before because of the power of technology. Okay, so what do we do then? What I've been encouraging everybody to do is to learn how to fly. And what does that mean? Again, another acronym, but I being a pilot, I love this one. First, lead yourself. And the reason I asked everybody to sort of check yourself, are you vulnerable to perceptions? It's rampant in society today. I'm not being critical. I'm being realistic that we are all vulnerable to being kind of tribal and following whatever our friends think without really digging in and understanding. So it starts with each of us. For you to be able to fly, you've got to be able to internalize that difference between following perceptions and having a perspective on any given issue. And how do we do that? I call these meta skills, the things we didn't learn in school. I don't remember a class on critical thinking specifically, but what to learn. And the what to learn, I call this change, confidence, and clarity. To me, that's my gift. I'm able to deal with change. It's an advantage. I've got confidence to be able to do something about it, and then clarity of inbound listening and outbound communicating. Those things are really powerful. And then the how to learn, critical thinking, which is something we tend to take for granted, but too seldom do. I did a lot of business with Japan. And Edward Deming went to Japan and taught them basically a critical thinking process. It's a scientific method. He dumbed it down for the Japanese and called it Plan, Do, See. And basically it was have a hypothesis, take an action, and then step back and see what happened and measure the results. That's the scientific method. And then if you blew up the chem lab, you say, okay, we're going to start over. We're not going to mix those two chemicals, right? I can tell you after 40 years of business, we're really good as Americans at the plan part. We're pretty good at the do part. We're really good at the do part. We are terrible at the see part. We give a lot of lip service to measuring results, but do we really measure them and do we really change our behavior afterwards? So that's the opportunity to truly get back to critical thinking. Creativity, I'm going to give you a great example. I brought a prop in the other room. You guys like this package? Cold beer, right? Aluminum bottle. You know where it came from? Me. No, here's the true story. Here's how this happened. I'm in Japan. Lost in translation moment. I'm brain dead. Oh, it's 3 a.m. Reaching the minibar. I want water. Whoa, what's that? It's cold. It was grapefruit juice in an aluminum bottle. I took it back to Anheuser-Busch and Miller. I said, I want beer in that. I need cold beer because Walmart's selling beer 50 cents below my cost. I need a way to have colder beer. And I want you to package beer in this package. And they gave me lip service, blah, 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 for 2 years. And then finally I had a dinner scheduled with August Busch, and you know what he would do? He would show up with his advanced team, with a silver champagne bucket filled with long necks, perfectly chilled long necks. Well, when we had dinner one night, the long neck champagne bucket came out, and then a second champagne bucket came out. I had these packaged in Japan with the Budweiser logo. He's like, "What's that? Where did that come from?" And I said, "Try one of mine." And he picked it up and he went, "Whoa, damn." And at the time, they were trying to sell beer in PET bottles, in plastic bottles, because they needed a package for stadiums. And it was a horrible decision. He finally, that night, said, "Okay, I'll do it." Now, why do I use that model for creativity? No one thinks a CEO is supposed to be creative. No, it's the marketing department that does that. Heaven forbid. No, it's everybody's job. We're all creative. I'm an artist. You know why I'm an artist? Because I have no fear of being an artist. You want to tell me my art's critical, my art's not good? I'm going to take you to MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, and we're going to walk in, I'm going to show you a box of rocks. Tell me if that's good or not. Right? It's artistic, it's expression. There's no such thing as good or bad when it comes to expressing yourself. And once you get over that fear of being an artist, you too can be creative, which you must be to succeed in a world of AI, because AI is not going to be creative in the same way. It's that these are the unique human things that will help us succeed in a world of AI. AI is going to go really deep on knowledge, but it's not going to go deep on emotion, on creativity, things that we can bring as a human to the table. And then finally, the why to learn, collaboration, critical thinking. Collaboration. I call this cultural literacy. I have a lot of fun with. I spoke at a New York Young Republicans group. I was right after Steve Bannon. And I'm going to talk about diversity and DEI, because I remember I went to Columbia. This was the week of the Columbia riots, right? I walk into the Lions Den. These kids were loaded for bear. They're like, "You went to Columbia. You know what it is? It's that damn DEI." Yeah, okay, whatever. So I tell them the story about how I go to London and go to school, and the Brits hated me. Because where I grew up, everybody was Irish or Italian. I had no exposure to minorities at all. They were Irish or Italian. The Irish hated the Italians, the Italians hated the Irish. I was a little of both, so I was conflicted. I go to Britain, the Brits hated me because I was an ugly American. I didn't know how to talk. I had to be doing something, playing darts or doing something. I was totally out of my element culturally. And you know who befriended me? My friends from Pakistan and from India, who were the minorities at that time in London. And they took me aside and said, "Jim, you're not in Kansas anymore. You're a baseball player, you brag about it. They call that rounders here. Girls play that. We play cricket." They taught me to play cricket. I was a decent athlete. So I thought, bat's this big, you know that confidence thing? Bat's that wide, the ball bounces once. How hard can this be? So they're teaching me all fall, all winter, how to defend the wicket in the halls. And I go out to spring training and I make the team. Because I'm thinking, confidence. What a great sport. I hit a foul ball, I get 6 runs. I love this sport. It destroyed my baseball career, by the way. I came back and not hit a curveball again if my life depended on it. But I learned cultural literacy. Little did I realize 20 years later, I'd run a company where the largest contingent of franchisees were from Pakistan or India. I'd been to their weddings for 4 days. I understood the culture. When I had to bring 7-Eleven to China, I understood I needed to learn the culture before I was successful in China. And when I did business with the Japanese, I learned the language because, as someone was sharing earlier, there's no word, there's no direct translation for yes. So they'll say hi, and that means I acknowledge you, not yes. So Americans get really mad because they say, "Damn it, we just negotiated this yesterday and you agreed and we went home and you came back tomorrow and now you're saying that you changed your mind." No, they didn't. They never agreed. They acknowledged. And when I learned the language, I learned the culture, cultural literacy. In a global world that is shrinking, all this nationalist noise we've got out there, you're not going to put the technology genie back in the bottle. This world is going to continue to shrink, and those who embrace technology and embrace a shrinking world and understand cultural literacy are going to prevail. I think. One person's opinion.
Agree.
Thank you. And so these are I call them the hierarchy of success. And if you want to learn more about them, each chapter in my book zeroes in on a lot of stories about how they're important. The idea that confidence can be learned, we can reprogram the patterns in our brain. One last story as a pilot. I never understood this, but once a year to have the privilege of flying single pilot, no crew at 40,000 feet, I have to train with the pros. So I'm in a simulator once a year where they try to kill me for 3 days. It's true. I get wind shear, I get engine fires, I get every awful thing that could happen. And I never knew this. I was just going every year, come out of there until I start digging into neuroscience. And I realized, you know what they're doing? They are changing the patterns of my brain. So when a disaster happens, I have no time for fear. I immediately turn to my emergency procedures checklist. I don't use gut reaction. I know exactly where the solution is. I pull it out and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through the steps to correct that crisis. And I gotta tell you, next time you're in a commercial flight, do you want your pilot to have the fight or flight syndrome? You don't want his amygdala going off. Because if it does, he's gonna rip the wings off the airplane, or he and the co-pilot are gonna look at each other and go, I don't know, what are you doing? An Airbus actually went all the way into the ocean by doing that. You don't want your pilot having that fight or flight. So I call it the aviator brain, that you want to replace that caveman brain with an aviator brain. The same principle works in the boardroom. Each of us has the ability to reprogram our own minds and our team to be able to have an aviator brain and not have that fight or flight thing destroy careers or destroy corporations. And then finally, let's go to how to learn. And I'm gonna close with one. Let's jump ahead. Okay, so you got all this stuff and it sounds easy, right? Knowledge is the antidote to ignorance. We can overcome fear with knowledge. Oh, let's go back to that little kid. Okay, so mom came in and turned on the light, and he said, oh, okay, but what's in the closet? It's the unknown. So knowledge can help us with what's known. What do we do about the unknown? What do we do about those things that we can't learn because there's some things that you just don't know, you won't know. So I'm going to turn back to Yoda first, because when Yoda was teaching Luke, he did something that was more important than just knowledge of being a Jedi. Remember what it was? Luke, may the Force be with you. I thought, and I went back and researched it and found out it's true, George Lucas used this as a beautiful metaphor for faith. And he used it on purpose because it was agnostic. And I've now been 14 countries in the last 12 months, and I'm talking about faith. In Kuwait, I'm talking about faith. And I had a Sheikh Mubarak in Kuwait raise his hand in the middle of this discussion, and I thought, uh-oh, because I didn't know how this was going to go. And I'm the only Christian in the room talking about the importance of faith, and he stood up and he read me a passage from the Quran. And it was a beautiful moment, because basically he said, I'm not going to do a very good job paraphrasing it, but even Allah recognized that if you can't overcome your own fear, then even Allah isn't going to help you. You have to be able to recognize your own fear. And in the Quran, 170 times is the passage, do not be afraid. The
Amen.
Torah, 120 times.
Amen.
The Bible, 300, you say amen. 365 times in the Bible is the most often repeated passage in the Bible. Do not be afraid.
Amen.
Yeah, we're running around afraid of everything. In Kuwait, I joked about my fellow Christians are afraid that they're going to take Christmas from us if we don't say Merry Christmas. You know, I think we're okay. There's 2.6 billion Christians out there. I think Christmas is okay. The Grinch isn't going to come for us. But it's that fear of the unknown, of uncertainty, and it causes so much trouble between us, and it's so unnecessary. So I turn back to my flying metaphor because I found this beautiful passage from John Paul II. So here's every religion from Hindu to Islam to Christianity recognizing the importance of overcoming fear. John Paul II, I thought, said it best of anybody I've ever heard. He said, think of it as two wings. If a bird has one wing that's stronger than the other, you're gonna fly around in circles. If a plane loses one engine, it's gonna go into a spiral. And the way he described it was, too much faith without reason becomes superstition. Too much reason without faith becomes nihilism or narcissism. But it's that balance, and this is the beautiful part, that is like two wings that elevate the human spirit to seek truth, which ultimately is what we all want. We all want to seek truth. We all want to use knowledge and faith, the combination of those two things, to overcome that caveman brain, that irrational fear that drives so many of us. And it kills careers, it kills companies, it can kill whole societies. So my wish for you is that, as I said, I wanted to help humanity learn to fly. I hope by calling you out, perhaps, on your own struggles between perception and perspective, that I've helped you think about, can you too learn to fly by having this balance? And so I hope you'll take away that education is freedom, that change equals opportunity, and that you too, individually and collectively, we can learn to fly. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have time just to take a few questions. Are there any questions for James? Okay, Lucy? Yeah, James, do you mind taking a few questions?
I'm good. I'm not afraid.
James, first of all, congratulations. This is awesome.
Thank you.
I understand you met the U.S. Secretary of Education, and you have a vision to transform education and the education sector. Can you talk something about that?
Yeah, I would love to. In fact, I had it in the deck, but the deck was getting too long and I didn't want to bore everybody with it. But can I share a couple of slides?
Absolutely.
Because this is you guys could help me with this. So here's the opportunity. Oh, that was my thank you. Here's America's report card. This is where we stand on education. I took this message to the White House. I wasn't getting any luck because I was saying, don't eliminate the Department of Education, instead reinvent it with technology. And I wouldn't get anywhere. And so I made up these red caps and I call it the mega plan, make education great again. And it actually worked. It got me an audience with the Secretary of Education. And so, I've been scaring them basically with this report card that, and this is national statistics, 31% of our fourth graders can read in America. And people don't believe this, these federal numbers, this is reading proficiency. So fourth graders at a fourth grade level of reading proficiency. Now the reality is if you can't read by the fourth grade, you're toast in America. You're gonna get left behind. And that's real. So in mathematics, we're in the third quartile of developed countries, OECD countries. Third quartile in math. If the future is technology, where are we going to be without students who understand math? This is the scary one for me, because there's a big narrative around now that college is no longer important. We've fallen to 39% of our 18 to 24-year-olds attending college. Now, what does that mean globally for competitiveness? China, in 1998, had 10% of their population. We used to say they wanted to keep their people stupid. That's now our mantle. Because China has gone from 10% of their population in 1998 to 61% of their 18 to 24-year-olds graduating from college. That is 20 million college graduates per year. India is graduating 15 million per year. That's 35 million college graduates, many with STEM education, and we're now at 4 million in decline. Who is going to take the jobs of the next 20, 30, 40 years? I mean, this is a competitive world out here. And so that's a wake-up call, I think, for the Department of Education. So what I'm suggesting is that there's a national security issue here. There's a global competitiveness issue. National security, we're all worried about, people with tanks and bombs. Well, my friends in the military tell me that hypersonic missiles are going to make aircraft carriers spring-loaded to the bottom of the ocean. And it's all going to be about technology, as you can imagine. So are we going to be able to compete on a national security basis without the technologists? Human rights, we worry about SNAP benefits and all that stuff. Well, if we increase the population of kids that can't read, we're going to be spending more on SNAP, more on crime, more on social issues. And so bottom line is, and this was the inspiration for the book, Education is Freedom, that even the forefathers, Jefferson, de Tocqueville from France, said that an educated populace is the foundation of a working democracy. And I think we're seeing some of that right now out there at risk. So without just throwing blame around, which is what's going on in the education system today, I'm trying to come up with a solution. So this was my mega idea. And I'm not an educator, I'm not a technologist, but I've run 2 companies and understood the power of technology to transform companies. Nothing is more local than a 7-Eleven store. Every individual store has a different consumer demand pattern and needs data to be able to manage that product assortment, just like a school district. But today we have 13,000 school districts, independent districts in America, each with their own system, each with their own RFP process. So you could have the best literacy tool in the world that could automatically teach kids to read by the time they're in the first grade. And it would take us 20 years to get that system passed through the RFP process of 13,000 independent school districts. Makes no sense. I couldn't run a company this way. Why are we running our country this way? Because it's a popular thing to say education's local, push it down. You need data locally and nationally. So here's the objective, a goal of 100% literacy, not 31%. This is America. We should have a goal of 100% literacy, which is possible. Malawi is issuing a tablet PC, a tablet computer with an AI tutor to every kid in the country because they want 100% literacy. We're going to let Malawi beat America? Why? We've got the tools. Let's use the scale to make it work. And then so finally, I hope I can make this work. I don't know if we've got audio.
Put your mic.
Literacy has reached 100% by the 4th grade, and US students now rank among the
you hear
top in the world in math and science. This remarkable turnaround has been credited to the launch of the federally funded Education Operating System, EOS.
This is a
platform
fake
that
news
connects
report
every teacher
from 2035. I made this with AI.
digital network. A student excitedly says, "I can't wait to go to school this morning because today, in science class, we'll take a video field trip to watch a live heart transplant at UT Southwestern Medical School. In civics, we'll sit in on a Supreme Court debate about free speech and even vote in real time on the arguments we hear. During lunch, I'll open my student portal. Every grade I've ever earned since kindergarten, right at my fingertips. I'll run a quick projection to see what it'll take to graduate cum laude. My Scholar Dollar balance just passed $9,500, earned from online exams and extracurricular courses. Thanks to compound interest, that's my head start for college. Tonight I'll open my Education is Freedom app for a virtual tour of UT and SMU. Maybe I'll work on my next merit badge in the BSA app. Oh, and this morning, when I opened my portal, I got a job offer. Deloitte reviewed my student resume and offered me a summer internship in their consulting group. A teacher proudly exclaims, "As a teacher, EOS has changed everything. My lesson plans are built online, instantly personalized for every student. I can invite world experts, scientists, historians, to appear in my classroom in real time. AI tutors analyze each child's learning style and adapt accordingly, virtually eliminating learning disabilities. For the first time, every student learns at their own pace, and every teacher can focus on what matters most, inspiring curiosity. Teaching has become what it was always meant to be, a human connection, powered by limitless access to knowledge. This is the future we built together. Education Operating System, EOS.
Thank you, and that is the reason I'm thankful for this audience, is you guys could actually make this happen. You know the power of technology. So I have no idea, I'm planting seeds. This is planting corn. And if anyone has any ideas on how to advance this concept of a national operating system so that we can open it up, I compare it to when I was clinging to my BlackBerry. My life depended on it until they finally created iOS, and I couldn't live without access to these apps. Why not have every kid have access to every ed tech tool that exists and have it right there at their fingertips in an interoperable, secure, and private system where you're safe? This is possible. Technology exists. With Starlink today, we could not just do this in America, we could make this available to every kid everywhere on the planet. And you talk about changing humanity, elevating humanity, using AI, not to worry about AI destroying humanity, but having AI elevate human learning at a rate we've never seen before. I think it's possible, and I'd love to have anyone who wants to help. Come on, let's do this. Thank you.